In the quiet little town of Maplewood, life moved at its own pace. The streets were lined with old trees and the air always carried a faint smell of freshly cut grass. It wasn't the kind of place where big things happened often, but it was home to Ethan Carter, a single dad who had learned the hard way how unpredictable life could be. Ethan had been running his small repair shop for years now. He was good at what he did. People from all over town trusted him to fix their cars, bikes, or anything else with wheels. But being a mechanic wasn't just about earning money for Ethan. It was also a way to keep his mind busy. 3 years ago, his wife passed away in an accident, leaving him alone with their 7-year-old daughter, Lily. Since then, every day felt like walking on shaky ground. Some days were okay, while others made him miss her so much that even tightening a bolt couldn't distract him. Lily was his everything. She had her mother's smile and her father's curiosity. Every evening after school, she'd come bouncing into the garage, holding up drawings she'd made during art class. Sometimes they'd sit together under the shade of the big oak tree, outside the shop, eating sandwiches and talking about random things like why clouds looked like animals or whether robots could ever get tired. Those moments reminded Ethan why he kept going, even when things got tough. One rainy afternoon, as Ethan wiped grease off his hands and prepared to close the shop, something unusual caught his eye. A camper van pulled into the driveway, sputtering and making strange noises before coming to a stop right in front of him. Out stepped a woman wearing oversized sunglasses and a hoodie pulled low over her face. She looked out of place, almost as if she didn't want anyone to recognize her. "Hi," she said hesitantly, glancing around as though checking if anyone else was watching. "I think my camper broke down a few miles back. Do you think you can take a look?" Her voice was soft, almost nervous, but there was a hint of desperation in it too. Ethan nodded and grabbed his toolbox. "Sure thing," he replied casually. "Let me see what we're dealing with." As he walked toward the camper, Ethan couldn't help but notice how uneasy the woman seemed. She fidgeted with her sleeves and kept looking over her shoulder, as if expecting someone or maybe avoiding someone. When he asked her name, she simply said, "Claire," without offering any more details. The camper itself was nothing fancy. It looked like it had seen better days, with scratches along the sides and rust forming near the wheel wells. Still, Ethan figured it must mean something important to Claire, given how urgently she wanted it fixed. As he popped open the hood, he tried striking up a conversation to ease the awkwardness. "So are you passing through town, or is this your first time here?" Claire hesitated before answering. "Just passing through," she murmured vaguely. "Needed a break from everything." Ethan raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. Everyone had their reasons for wanting to escape, and he respected that. Besides, he was used to meeting strangers with stories they weren't ready to share yet. What mattered most was getting the job done. Over the next hour, Ethan worked quietly, inspecting the engine and diagnosing the problem. The rain drizzled steadily outside, creating a soothing rhythm against the roof of the garage. Occasionally, Claire would step closer to watch him work, her arms crossed tightly around herself. There was something intriguing about her, something Ethan couldn't quite put his finger on. She didn't seem like the typical traveler who'd end up in Maplewood by chance. Her clothes were too neat, her posture too deliberate. And those sunglasses? They hadn't come off once. When Ethan finally emerged from under the hood, he turned to her with a reassuring smile. "Looks like I'll need a couple of days to fix this properly," he explained. "There's some wiring issues and a leak in the radiator. Nothing major, but it'll take some time." Claire let out a breath she seemed to have been holding. "Thank you," she said earnestly. "I really appreciate it." For a moment their eyes met, and Ethan saw something flicker in hers. Gratitude, relief, maybe even a trace of fear. Whatever it was, it stayed hidden behind the shield she wore so carefully. Little did Ethan know, this stranger named Claire wasn't just another customer. She was someone with secrets bigger than Maplewood itself. And as the rain continued to fall, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter might change both their lives in ways neither of them expected. The next morning, Ethan woke up early as usual. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the sleepy town of Maplewood. He made himself a cup of coffee and headed straight to the garage. Claire's camper was still parked outside, looking oddly out of place among the rusted trucks and old cars that usually filled the driveway. It wasn't fancy, but there was something about it, something mysterious, that kept drawing his attention. As Ethan rolled up his sleeves and got back to work, he couldn't stop thinking about Claire. She seemed so guarded, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Most people who came into his shop were locals or tourists passing through, happy to chat about their travels or ask for recommendations on where to eat in town. But Claire? She barely said 2 words unless spoken to directly. Her nervous energy was palpable, and Ethan found himself wondering what or who she was running from. Around mid-morning, Claire showed up again. This time she didn't have her sunglasses on, and Ethan noticed how tired she looked. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "How's it going?" she asked softly, glancing at the camper. "It's coming along," Ethan replied with a reassuring smile. "Still got some work to do, but nothing I can't handle." Claire nodded, though she seemed distracted. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen for a moment before quickly shoving it back into her pocket. Ethan raised an eyebrow but decided not to comment. Instead, he tried to lighten the mood. "So, you're not much of a talker, huh?" She gave him a weak smile. "Not lately. No. Let's just say, I've had a lot on my mind." Ethan nodded knowingly. He understood what it meant to carry burdens too heavy to share. "Well, if you ever feel like talking, I'm a pretty good listener. And trust me, this town doesn't exactly have Yelp reviews for gossip." That earned a small chuckle from Claire, and for the first time since she arrived, Ethan saw a hint of warmth in her expression. "Thanks," she said quietly. "I might take you up on that." Over the next couple of days, Claire became a regular presence around the garage. She'd show up every afternoon, sitting on a folding chair while Ethan worked. Sometimes she'd bring snacks, a bag of chips or a thermos of hot tea, and insist he take a break to eat. Other times she'd pace nervously, muttering to herself when she thought no one was listening. Ethan started noticing little things about her. For instance, she always kept her phone close, checking it obsessively even though it rarely rang. Once he saw her delete several messages without reading them. Another time, she flinched when a car drove by, as if expecting someone to jump out and confront her. Whatever she was hiding, it clearly weighed heavily on her. One day, Lily came, bounding into the garage after school, her backpack bouncing against her back. "Daddy, look what I drew," she exclaimed, holding up a colorful picture of a house surrounded by flowers. Claire, who had been sitting quietly nearby, leaned forward to get a better look. "That's beautiful," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Did you draw that all by yourself?" Lily beamed with pride. "Yup. We learned about shapes today, so I used circles and squares to make the windows." Claire smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile this time, and complimented Lily's creativity. Then, almost hesitantly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small bracelet made of colorful beads. "Here," she said, handing it to Lily. "This reminded me of your drawing. Thought you might like it." Lily's eyes lit up as she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. "Thank you, it's so pretty." She turned to Ethan, grinning. "Can I keep it, Daddy?" "Of course," Ethan replied, amused by his daughter's excitement. But as he watched Claire interact with Lily, he felt a pang of curiosity. There was kindness in her gestures, a tenderness that suggested she knew what it was like to care for someone deeply. It made him wonder about her past, about the life she left behind. By the 3rd day, Ethan had uncovered more problems with the camper than he initially anticipated. Faulty wiring, a leaking radiator, rusted brakes. The list went on. Each issue required careful attention, and Ethan poured all his focus into fixing them. Claire stayed nearby, watching silently as he worked. Occasionally, she'd offer to help, though Ethan politely declined, knowing she probably wouldn't know a wrench from a screwdriver. It was during one of these quiet moments that Ethan decided to test the waters. You know, he began casually, wiping grease off his hands. You seem like someone who's used to being recognized everywhere they go. Claire froze mid-sip of her tea. Her hand trembled slightly before she set the cup down. What makes you say that? She asked, her tone cautious. Ethan shrugged. Just a hunch. You've got this whole hiding in plain sight vibe going on. Plus, you're way too jumpy for someone who's just taking a road trip. For a long moment, Claire didn't respond. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she let out a sigh. Let's just say, I needed a break. From everything. People. Noise. Expectations. She paused, then added quietly, sometimes it feels like the world won't leave you alone unless you disappear completely. Ethan nodded slowly, sensing she was telling the truth, but only part of it. Well, don't worry, he said lightly. Maplewood isn't exactly a hot spot for paparazzi. You're safe here. Claire managed a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed a lingering sadness. Safe is relative, isn't it? Later that evening, as Ethan closed up the shop, he found himself replaying their conversation in his head. Something about Claire's words stuck with him. She wasn't just hiding from everyday stress, it was deeper than that. Maybe she was running from trouble, or maybe she was protecting herself or someone else. Either way, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than she was letting on. As he walked home with Lily skipping beside him, Ethan realized he didn't mind the mystery. In fact, he kind of liked it. Claire's presence had brought a spark of intrigue to his otherwise predictable routine, and despite her secrets, there was something undeniably genuine about her, a quality that made him want to help her, no matter what. Little did Ethan know the biggest surprise was yet to come. By the fourth day, Ethan was deep into fixing Claire's camper. The job had turned out to be more complicated than he'd first thought, but that didn't bother him. If anything, it gave him a chance to focus on something other than his own worries for a while. He liked challenges. It reminded him of the early days when he was still learning the ropes of being a mechanic. Back then, every problem felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Now, with years of experience under his belt, he approached each repair with calm confidence. Claire continued showing up every afternoon, just as she had been doing since the first day. She'd sit quietly on her folding chair, sometimes sketching in a small notebook or staring off into the distance. Occasionally, she'd ask questions about what Ethan was doing, though her tone suggested she wasn't really interested in mechanics. It was almost as if she just wanted to keep talking, to fill the silence between them. One thing Ethan noticed was how much Lily seemed to enjoy Claire's company. The two of them had formed an unlikely bond over art. Whenever Lily came bouncing into the garage after school, she'd proudly show off her latest drawings to Claire, who always responded with genuine enthusiasm. "Wow, this is amazing," Claire would say, pointing out little details that even Ethan hadn't noticed. "You're going to be a great artist someday." Lily ate it up. For a kid who missed having a mom around, Claire's attention meant the world to her. And for Ethan, watching them together brought a warmth to his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. There was something comforting about seeing his daughter laugh and smile so freely again. But despite the growing connection between them, Claire remained guarded. Ethan could tell she was holding back, keeping parts of herself hidden behind a wall of politeness and vague answers. Still, he couldn't help but feel curious. Who was this woman, really? Why did she seem so afraid of being found? And why did she choose Maplewood, a tiny town where nothing exciting ever happened, as her hiding spot? The answer came unexpectedly on the fifth day. Ethan had been working underneath the camper, trying to fix a particularly stubborn wiring issue, when he reached into the glove compartment for some spare parts. That's when he saw it, an envelope tucked away in the corner, partially hidden beneath a stack of maps. At first, he didn't think much of it. People often kept random things in their vehicles, receipts, old photos, snacks they forgot about. But something about this envelope caught his eye. Curiosity got the better of him. He pulled it out and opened it carefully, revealing a laminated ID card inside. His breath hitched as he read the name printed across it. Claire Hampton, CEO, Hampton Industries. Below her name was a photo of her looking polished and professional in a tailored suit. Ethan stared at it for a moment, his mind racing. Hampton Industries? The name sounded familiar, but it took him a second to place it. Then it hit him. Hampton Industries wasn't just any company, it was one of the biggest tech conglomerates in the world. Claire Hampton was its founder and CEO, a billionaire whose face had appeared on magazine covers and news headlines countless times. She was famous, or infamous depending on who you asked, for revolutionizing industries and amassing a fortune that most people could only dream of. Ethan sat back on his heels, stunned. All this time he'd been repairing the camper of one of the richest women on the planet. A woman who, judging by her behavior, clearly didn't want anyone to know who she really was. For a moment, Ethan debated whether he should confront her. Should he call her out on the spot, or pretend he hadn't seen anything? In the end, he decided against both options. Instead, he slipped the ID back into the envelope and returned it to its hiding place. Whatever Claire was running from, it wasn't his place to judge or interfere. Not yet, anyway. Later that evening, when Claire arrived at the garage, Ethan greeted her as usual. "Hey," he said casually, wiping grease off his hands. "How's it going?" "Fine," she replied, though her eyes darted toward the camper, for a split second before settling on him. "Any progress?" "Getting there," Ethan said with a nod. "Just a few more adjustments and you'll be good to go." He hesitated, then added, "You know, I've been thinking, you mentioned needing a break from everything. What exactly does everything mean for someone like you?" Claire stiffened slightly, her shoulders tensing. "Someone like me?" she echoed, her voice tinged with caution. Ethan shrugged, keeping his tone light. "Well, you strike me as someone who's used to a certain kind of life. Fast-paced, high-pressure, surrounded by people who recognize your face wherever you go. Am I wrong?" Claire let out a shaky laugh. "No, you're not wrong." She paused, then added quietly, "Sometimes it feels like the whole world is watching you, waiting for you to mess up. And when you do..." Her voice trailed off, but the pain in her expression said enough. Ethan nodded sympathetically. "Sounds exhausting." "It is," Claire admitted. "That's why I needed to get away, just for a little while to clear my head." Ethan studied her closely, noting the weariness in her eyes. "And whoever's chasing you, they won't stop anytime soon, will they?" Claire froze, her gaze locking onto his. "What makes you think someone's chasing me?" Ethan leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. "Call it a hunch. You're too careful, too nervous, like you're expecting trouble to find you no matter where you hide." For a long moment, Claire didn't respond. She looked away, her jaw tightening, as if she were debating whether to trust him. Finally, she sighed. "You're sharper than you let on, aren't you?" "I try," Ethan replied with a faint smile. Claire hesitated, then began speaking slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Let's just say, I've made enemies. Powerful ones. People who don't take kindly to losing control or money. Someone close to me betrayed me, leaking private information to rivals. Now everyone knows my business, including people who shouldn't." Ethan frowned. "That must have been rough." "You have no idea," Claire muttered bitterly. "It's not just about the money or the company. It's about safety. Mine and my family's. I couldn't stay in the city, not with cameras following my every move and strangers lurking outside my house. So I left, took the camper and disappeared." Ethan listened intently, his heart aching for her. He knew what it was like to lose someone you loved, to feel like the world was closing in on you. But Claire's situation was different, and far more dangerous. "So what's the plan?" he asked gently. "Where are you headed next?" Claire shook her head. "I don't know. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one will look for me." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Well, until then, you're welcome here. Nobody in Maplewood will bother you. We're not exactly known for our detective skills." Claire managed a small smile. Thanks, I appreciate that more than you know. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the garage, Ethan realized how much Claire's story resonated with him. They were both survivors, in their own ways, both carrying scars from battles they never asked to fight. And though their lives couldn't have been more different, they shared a common desire: to protect the people they loved. Little did Ethan know, Claire's presence in Maplewood would bring changes neither of them could have anticipated. But, for now, all he cared about was finishing the repairs and ensuring she could continue her journey safely. After all, helping others was what he did best, and Claire needed all the help she could get. By the 6th day, Ethan could see the light at the end of the tunnel, or rather the finish line for Claire's camper repairs. The wiring was nearly sorted, the radiator leak patched up, and the brakes were as good as new. Still, he wasn't rushing. There was something about working on this project that felt different from any other job he'd done before. Maybe it was because of Claire herself, the way she lingered around the garage quietly observing or sketching in her notebook. Or maybe it was the growing bond between her and Lily, who now greeted Claire every afternoon with a hug and an enthusiastic update about her day. Ethan noticed how much lighter Claire seemed compared to when she first arrived. Her shoulders weren't as tense and she smiled more often, genuine smiles that reached her eyes. It was like Maplewood had given her a temporary reprieve from whatever storm she'd been running from. And yet, Ethan couldn't ignore the flicker of sadness that still lingered beneath the surface. He knew all too well what it meant to carry invisible burdens, even when surrounded by kindness. One evening, after finishing up some final adjustments on the camper, Ethan invited Claire to sit with him under the big oak tree outside the garage. It was one of his favorite spots, a quiet place where he often went to think or simply breathe. Lily joined them too, clutching her latest drawing. A picture of the three of them standing together under the tree, surrounded by flowers and sunshine. "This is us," Lily declared proudly, pointing to each stick figure. "See? That's you, Daddy, and that's me, and that's... She paused, looking at Claire with a sheepish grin. "I don't know your last name." Claire chuckled softly. "You can just call me Claire," she said, gently ruffling Lily's hair. "And thank you for including me in your masterpiece." Lily beamed, clearly pleased with herself. As she ran off to play, Ethan turned to Claire, studying her profile against the fading sunlight. "You've got a way with kids," he remarked casually. "Lily hasn't warmed up to someone so quickly since her mom passed away." Claire's expression softened, but there was a shadow of guilt in her eyes. "She's a sweet girl," she said quietly. "Reminds me of my niece back home. Smart, curious, full of energy." Ethan nodded, sensing the unspoken weight behind her words. "Do you miss them? Your family, I mean." Claire hesitated, then sighed. "More than anything. But right now, staying away is the best thing I can do for them. If I go back too soon, it'll put them in danger, and I can't risk that." Her voice cracked slightly, and Ethan instinctively reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Hey, you're doing what you need to do. Nobody should have to choose between their safety and their loved ones, but sometimes life doesn't give us easy answers." Claire looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "How do you keep going?" she asked suddenly. "After losing someone you love? How do you wake up every morning and not let the pain swallow you whole?" The question caught Ethan off guard. He hadn't expected her to open up so vulnerably, especially about something so personal. For a moment he stared at the ground, collecting his thoughts. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he began to speak. "It's not easy," he admitted. "Some days are harder than others. But I guess I keep going because of Lily. She's my reason. Every time I feel like giving up, I look at her, and I remember that she needs me. And honestly, fixing things helps too. Whether it's a broken car or a busted pipe, there's something satisfying about taking something damaged and making it whole again. It reminds me that healing is possible, even If it takes time. Claire listened intently, her gaze never leaving his face. When he finished speaking, she gave him a small, grateful smile. Thank you, she said softly, for sharing that, and for everything else. I don't think I would have made it this far without your help. Ethan waved off her gratitude, with a modest shrug. It's just part of the job, besides anyone would have done the same. But Claire shook her head firmly. No, they wouldn't. You didn't have to fix my camper as thoroughly as you did. You didn't have to let me hang around your shop or talk to me like I'm a human being instead of, well, a problem waiting to happen. Most people wouldn't bother. But you did. Her words hit Ethan harder than he expected. In that moment, he realized how rare it was for Claire to feel seen, not as a billionaire CEO or a public figure, but as a person. Someone with fears and dreams and flaws. Someone trying their best to survive in a world that often felt overwhelming. As the sky darkened and stars began to twinkle above them, Claire opened up further, sharing snippets of her life that she hadn't dared to reveal until now. She told Ethan about her childhood, how she grew up in a small town similar to Maplewood, dreaming of building things that could change the world. She spoke about the early days of her company, working long hours in a cramped office with nothing but determination and coffee to fuel her, and she confessed how lonely it had become at the top, surrounded by people who only cared about her wealth and influence. Ethan listened without interrupting, offering nods and murmurs of understanding whenever necessary. He didn't offer solutions or platitudes. He simply let her talk, knowing that sometimes the act of being heard was enough. By the time she finished, the air between them felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a sense of purpose. Today was the day he'd finally complete the repairs on Claire's camper. As he worked, he found himself reflecting on their conversations over the past week. Claire wasn't just a stranger passing through Maplewood anymore. She had become a friend, a complicated, guarded, extraordinary friend, but a friend nonetheless. When Claire arrived at the garage that afternoon, she brought along a picnic basket filled with sandwiches, fruit, and lemonade. I thought we could celebrate, she explained with a shy smile. You've worked so hard on this, and I wanted to say thank you properly. Ethan grinned, wiping grease off his hands. Now you're speaking my language. Food always makes celebrations better. They spread out a blanket near the oak tree and sat down together, enjoying the simple meal. Lily joined them too, chattering excitedly about school and showing off another drawing she'd made. This time it was a picture of the camper driving down a winding road, with the words Bon Voyage scrawled across the top in colorful letters. I hope you find what you're looking for, Lily said earnestly, handing the drawing to Claire. Wherever you're going. Claire accepted it with trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears. Thank you, she whispered, pulling Lily into a tight hug. That means more to me than you'll ever know. As the afternoon sun began to set, casting warm golden hues over the scene, Ethan felt a pang of sadness. He knew Claire would be leaving soon, and though he understood why, it didn't make saying goodbye any easier. Still, he reminded himself that their paths crossing had been meaningful, not just for her, but for him and Lily too. Before heading back to the camper, Claire turned to Ethan one last time. If you ever decide you want to change, she said hesitantly, I'd love to offer you a position at my company. You're exactly the kind of person we need, someone who values honesty and hard work above all else. Ethan blinked in surprise, touched by the gesture. That's incredibly generous, he replied sincerely. But my place is here, with Lily. Maplewood may not be glamorous, but it's home. Claire nodded, a hint of admiration in her eyes. I understand. Not everyone wants the spotlight. Sometimes the quiet heroes are the ones who make the biggest difference. With that, she climbed into the camper and started the engine. Ethan and Lily stood side by side, waving as she pulled out of the driveway and disappeared down the road. Though her journey was far from over, Ethan couldn't help but feel proud of the role he'd played in helping her move forward. Little did he know, Claire's impact on their lives was only beginning. The days following Claire's departure were quieter than usual in Maplewood. The hum of the garage, the chirping of birds, and the occasional laughter from Lily playing outside filled the air, but there was an undeniable void left behind. Ethan found himself glancing at the empty driveway where Claire's camper had been parked just a few days ago. It wasn't that he expected her to come back. It was more like a part of him wished she would. Still, life went on. Ethan returned to his routine, fixing cars for locals and teaching Lily how to change a tire or tighten a bolt during their evenings together. But something had shifted inside him. The conversations with Claire, the glimpses into her world, and the bond they'd formed over shared struggles lingered in his mind. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a spark of curiosity about what lay beyond the borders of Maplewood. Not because he wanted to leave, but because he realized how much bigger the world was, and how interconnected people could be, even when their lives seemed so different. One morning, as Ethan unlocked the garage, he noticed a car parked across the street. At first, he didn't think much of it. Strangers occasionally passed through town, stopping at the diner or gas station before moving on. But this car stayed put, its occupants sitting silently inside, staring at the shop. Something about it felt off. Ethan shrugged it off and got to work. By noon, though, the car was still there and another one had joined it. Two men stepped out wearing suits that looked out of place in the laid-back atmosphere of Maplewood. They approached the garage cautiously, their eyes scanning the area as if searching for something, or someone. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked, stepping forward with a polite but wary smile. "We're looking for someone," one of them said, his tone clipped and professional. "A woman. She might have stopped here recently." Ethan's heart skipped a beat, but he kept his expression calm. "Plenty of folks pass through here," he replied casually. "What does she look like?" The man pulled out a photo and showed it to Ethan. It was Claire, smiling confidently in a business setting clearly taken before her escape. Ethan recognized her immediately but pretended otherwise. "Sorry, doesn't ring a bell," he said, handing the picture back. "Like I said, lots of people come and go. Could have been anyone." The men exchanged skeptical glances but didn't press further. Instead, they handed Ethan a card. "If you see her, give us a call," one of them instructed. "It's important." Ethan nodded, slipping the card into his pocket without looking at it. As soon as the men returned to their car and drove away, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Trouble had arrived in Maplewood just as he'd feared. That evening, as Ethan sat at the kitchen table with Lily coloring beside him, he debated what to do next. He knew those men weren't ordinary reporters or curious tourists. They were dangerous. Claire had warned him about the kind of people chasing her, and now they'd followed her trail all the way to this sleepy little town. If they stuck around much longer, it wouldn't take them long to figure out that Ethan had helped her. Lily yawned, breaking his train of thought. "Daddy, are we going to see Claire again?" she asked innocently. Ethan hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said finally. "But I hope wherever she is, she's safe." Later that night, unable to sleep, Ethan pulled out his phone and scrolled through local news articles online. It didn't take long to find updates about Claire Hampton. Headlines screamed about corporate scandals, leaked documents, and threats against her safety. One article mentioned that bounty hunters had been hired to track her down, offering hefty rewards for information leading to her whereabouts. Ethan's stomach churned as he read between the lines. Claire hadn't exaggerated when she said her enemies were powerful. These weren't just business rivals. They were ruthless individuals who wouldn't hesitate to hurt anyone standing in their way, including innocent bystanders like Ethan and Lily. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. He couldn't risk waiting around for trouble to escalate. Grabbing the card the men had given him, he dialed the number listed on it. When a gruff voice answered, Ethan spoke carefully. "I think I may have seen the woman you're looking for," he lied. "She left a few days ago heading east. Said something about visiting relatives in Ohio." There was a pause on the other end. "You sure about that?" "As sure as I can be," Ethan replied, keeping his tone casual. "Looked pretty determined to keep moving. You might want to check along the interstate if you're trying to catch up." After a brief exchange, the man hung up. Ethan exhaled slowly, hoping his bluff would buy Claire some time. He couldn't guarantee it would throw them completely off her trail, but it was better than doing nothing. Over the next couple of days, Ethan kept a close eye on the strangers in town. To his relief, they didn't stick around for long. After circling the area and questioning a few locals, they packed up and left Maplewood, likely chasing the false lead he'd provided. Still, Ethan remained cautious. He doubled the locks on the garage doors and started taking different routes home each night, just in case anyone decided to double back. Despite the danger that had briefly touched their lives, Ethan couldn't help but feel proud of himself. He'd done everything he could to protect Claire and, by extension, his own family. Helping others was second nature to him, but this time it felt deeper. This wasn't just about fixing a broken vehicle. It was about giving someone a fighting chance to reclaim their life. Weeks passed and the tension in Maplewood eased. The strangers never returned, and Ethan allowed himself to relax once again. Life settled back into its predictable rhythm, though he often found himself thinking about Claire. Where was she now? Had she found a safe haven? Was she still running? Or had she managed to confront her enemies head-on? Then, one crisp autumn morning, Ethan received a package in the mail. There was no return address, only his name scrawled neatly across the brown wrapping paper. Curious, he opened it to find a handwritten letter and a thick envelope stuffed with documents. The letter read, "Dear Ethan, I hope this note finds you well. I wanted to thank you again for everything. Your kindness gave me not just a repaired camper, but also the courage to keep going when I felt like giving up. Thanks to your quick thinking, I was able to stay one step ahead of those who wish me harm. I'm currently somewhere safe, rebuilding my strength and planning my next move. Enclosed is a donation I'd like you to use however you see fit. Expand your shop, create a community center for kids like Lily, or simply treat yourself to something nice. You deserve it. Please don't refuse it. Consider it a token of gratitude from someone whose life you changed forever. Take care, Ethan. And know that people like you remind me why it's worth fighting for a better world." With deepest thanks, Claire. Ethan stared at the letter, his throat tightening with emotion. Inside the envelope were bank drafts totaling far more money than he'd ever imagined seeing in his lifetime. It wasn't just generosity, it was trust. Claire had entrusted him with a gift, meant to uplift not just his family but the entire town. For a moment, Ethan sat motionless, letting the weight of the gesture sink in. Then, with a renewed sense of purpose, he began sketching ideas for what he could do with the funds. A larger garage? Check. A space where kids could learn skills and build confidence? Absolutely. Claire had given him a chance to dream bigger, and he wasn't about to waste it. As he tucked the letter safely away, Ethan smiled to himself. Claire might have disappeared from Maplewood, but her presence had left an indelible mark. In helping her, he'd rediscovered parts of himself he thought he'd lost. The parts that believed in second chances, in human connection, and in the power of small acts of kindness to create ripples of change. And deep down, Ethan knew their paths might cross again someday. Until then, he carried her story with him. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could break through if you dared to let it. Weeks turned into months, and life in Maplewood slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The strangers who had come looking for Claire never returned, and Ethan allowed himself to breathe easier. Still, the memory of her lingered, not just in his thoughts but also in the changes she had inspired him to make. With the donation Claire had sent, Ethan began transforming his small repair shop into something bigger, brighter, and more meaningful. The first thing he did was expand the garage itself. He added 2 new bays, giving him space to work on more vehicles at once. Word spread quickly around town about the improvements, and soon enough, customers from neighboring areas started showing up, eager to see what all the fuss was about. But Ethan didn't stop there. Inspired by Claire's suggestion, he converted an unused corner of the property into a community center. a cozy space where kids could gather after school to learn new skills, play games, or simply hang out. Lily was thrilled with the idea. "Does this mean I get to be your helper now?" she asked one day, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Ethan chuckled, ruffling her hair. "You've always been my helper, kiddo. But yeah, you can teach other kids how to draw while they're here." The community center became a hub of activity almost overnight. Local parents brought their children, grateful for a safe place where they could spend time creatively. Ethan hired a retired teacher named Mrs. Thompson to oversee the programs, ensuring everything ran smoothly while he focused on the garage. There were art classes, workshops on basic mechanics, a favorite among the older kids, and even storytelling sessions led by volunteers from the library. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like he was truly making a difference, not just in his own life, but in the lives of others. As winter approached, bringing frosty mornings and shorter days, Ethan often found himself reflecting on how much had changed since Claire's visit. Her generosity had given him the resources to dream bigger, but it was her story that had reignited his belief in second chances. She had reminded him that no matter how different people's lives might seem, everyone carries burdens, and everyone deserves compassion. One chilly evening, as Ethan closed up the shop, he noticed a letter tucked under the windshield wiper of his truck. His heart skipped a beat. It wasn't addressed to him directly, just a plain white envelope with no name on it. Curious, he opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Claire's. "Hi, Ethan. I hope this letter finds you well. I heard about the amazing things you've done with the donation. It makes me so happy to know that my gratitude has helped create something beautiful. You've always had a gift for fixing things, not just machines, but people, too. Keep nurturing that gift. I'm still laying low, though I've started taking steps toward reclaiming my life. It's scary but also liberating. Knowing that there are good people like you out there gives me hope. Maybe someday when the dust settles, we'll cross paths again. Until then, take care of yourself. And Lily. She's lucky to have a dad like you." With love and admiration, Claire. Ethan read the letter twice, a lump forming in his throat. He hadn't expected to hear from her again, at least not so soon, but her words filled him with warmth, reminding him that their brief encounter had meant as much to her as it had to him. Folding the letter carefully, he tucked it into his pocket and headed home. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, he told her about the note. "Claire says hi," he said softly. "She's proud of what we've done with the community center." Lily yawned, snuggling deeper under her blanket. "Do you think she'll ever come back?" "Maybe," Ethan replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But even if she doesn't, she's still part of our story, and we're part of hers." As the weeks went by, Ethan continued building on the foundation Claire had helped him create. The community center flourished, becoming a beloved fixture in Maplewood. Parents stopped by to thank Ethan for providing a safe haven for their kids, and local businesses pitched in to sponsor events and supplies. It wasn't long before the entire town rallied behind the project, turning it into a shared success. Through it all, Ethan kept Claire's letter close, reading it whenever he needed a reminder of why he'd started this journey. Her act of kindness had sparked a chain reaction, proving that even the smallest gestures could ripple outward and touch countless lives. In helping her, he had rediscovered his own purpose, and in doing so, he had inspired others to do the same. One spring afternoon, as Ethan stood outside the newly painted community center watching a group of kids laugh and play, he felt a profound sense of peace. Life wasn't perfect, there were still challenges ahead, but he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. Maplewood might be a small town, but it was full of big hearts, including his own. And somewhere out there, Claire was forging her own path, rebuilding her life piece by piece. Though their worlds remained miles apart, they were connected by something deeper than geography, a shared understanding of resilience, hope, and the power of human connection. Ethan smiled to himself, feeling the sun warm his face. Whatever the future held, he was ready. After all, he'd learned that sometimes the most unexpected encounters could lead to the most extraordinary transformations.